You are the Minnesota Vikings, heading into 2016 full of confidence and excitement for the upcoming season as you have one of the best defenses in the NFL, one of the best running backs, and your young franchise quarterback headed into his third year. Then in a flash, boom, your quarterback goes down to a season-ending injury a week before the season starts. To compensate for the injury, your GM makes a gutsy and controversial move for former Heisman Trophy winner and oft-injured QB Sam Bradford from the Eagles in exchange for a first and fourth round pick. Already unsettled at the prospects of your now uncertain season, you managed to ride your defense to a win in Week 1 against the Titans. But then in a Week 2 matchup against your bitter rival Green Bay Packers, boom, lightning strikes again as your star running back Adrian Peterson goes down with an injury. Days later, it will be announced that he has a torn meniscus and will miss most, if not all, of the season. The Vikings might be the most surprising 2-0 team this year, but even with two huge injuries, I believe they can still make the playoffs. The main reason is quite simple. Defense. The Vikings had the 5th best scoring defense in the league last year, and this season have earned their team a win in Week 1 against the Titans with 2 defensive touchdowns and a win in Week 2 against the Packers against someone I just recently ranked the best quarterback in the league, Aaron Rodgers, forcing 4 fumbles, recovering 2 of them, intercepting him once, and holding Rodgers to just 213 yards passing. The defense is good, and as it has been said many times, defense wins championships. But a defense can't and probably won't hold up all season, so you've got to have at least some help on offense. And that is where Sam Bradford comes in. I'll be the first to tell you that in no way do I believe Sam Bradford is good enough to win the Vikings games, a la Brady or Rodgers, but I do think he's good enough to not lose them games. Last season, the Vikings went 11-5, winning the NFC North, and they did that with a quarterback who threw for just 3,200 yards and 14 TDs. Sam Bradford, in comparison for the Eagles last year, threw for 3,700 yards and 19 TDs. Not world-beating numbers by any stretch of the imagination, but good enough for the job that needs to be done. Bradford and Bridgewater are similar kind of players. Neither have a strong arm, and they fall into the often overused game manager player type. In his first game with the Vikings, Bradford was impressive, throwing for nearly 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions. The big thing as well to point out is that he continued to play well even as the game changed when Peterson went down to an injury in the third quarter. The Packers spent most of the game up until that point focusing on Peterson, holding him to just 19 yards on 12 carries. But after AP left the game, Bradford was still able to find Stefon Diggs for what would be the game-winning touchdown. Still, there remains a big question for the Vikings offense that already was not the strongest as they face a future without Adrian Peterson and week after week of defenses not having to game plan for him and instead being able to focus on Sam Bradford and the Vikings passing game. The one thing the Vikings have going for them here is that they know what it is like without Peterson. He missed all of the 2014 season, and in his place that year were current Vikings running backs Matt Asiata and Jerick McKinnon. Asiata scored 9 touchdowns, and together the pair ran for 1,100 yards that season. If they can replicate that this year, they will come close to replacing a running back in Peterson who ran for 1,500 yards and 11 touchdowns a year ago. Now, things didn't get off to the greatest foot for Asiata and McKinnon as they combined for 8 carries and 16 yards in the final quarter in a little bit in that game against the Packers this past week when Peterson went down with an injury. Now, you got to assume it's not exactly easy to just be thrown into the fire when your starting running back goes down. So, with a full week to prepare and every week following in this season, hopefully the Vikings have the time to game plan their running game plan their offense, and hopefully the 2 running backs now having to fill Adrian Peterson's shoes will do a little bit better job than they did against the Packers. It certainly won't be easy for the Vikings the remainder of the season, but as a team most were already aware had a bad offense, 29th last season, the Vikings might be set up for a better offense this year as without Peterson they will be forced to throw the ball much more and now have a quarterback who joins them after spending last season in a very pass-heavy Chip Kelly offense on the Eagles. I'm not saying the Vikings can win it all, and honestly, I'm not even saying that they're a for sure lock for the playoffs, but I'm saying in comparison to many other opinions out there that the Vikings season is over. You can't really jump to that conclusion quite yet because they're not actually too bad off considering the horrific start they've had and the horrific luck that they've had to the start of this season. And even I will admit I was a bit taken aback when I saw the news of the trade for Sam Bradford. But in hindsight, after taking a look at the entire situation for the Vikings, it's a pretty smart move because Bradford is pretty interchangeable with Teddy Bridgewater. So all you need to do is replicate last year's team, 29th in offense. They're 28th in offense currently through the first 2 weeks of the season. So yes, they very well could miss the playoffs, but judging by this team and where they're at already, sitting at 2-0 on the season, I think it's a pretty safe bet you will see them back in the playoffs at the end of the year.